Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. Today's program is going to be a conversation conducted by a couple of shutterbugs. That's what they used to call them anyway. I'm not sure in the digital age what they called them. And we're going to be talking with a very interesting gentleman. He's put together a fascinating book, which we can't really describe real well on the radio or in a podcast, but if you were watching the YouTube channel and the video, you're going to be able to see as we talk some of the images that will be splashing up there. My guest is Pen, and is it Densham?
Yep, that'll do. Still saying, as long as you sort of get it out somehow, it's good.
Well, but my perspective is I want to make sure that I get it right, not just get it out there.
You. I appreciate that.
So Pen is joining us, and he doesn't use a pen in his beautiful art. He uses a camera, and basically we are going to be talking about his latest work that's out there. I guess we'll try this one, EmotionalLandscapes. He's an Oscar-nominated filmmaker. He's the reinventor of NaturePhotography. And we'll get into your background and all of the things you've been involved with, but it is just absolutely remarkable, the images that I was looking at. You know, my wife and I, as I was sharing with you off air, we just moved, and in our living room, which is enormous. I mean, it's got to be, I don't know, 20 by 30 or larger. Yeah. And then we have a fireplace at one end and so forth. But what I was going to say was that the walls are all white. And as I'm looking through your pictures, I'm thinking, okay, I realized this was an expensive book, but I'm going to cut it up and I'm putting these things on the wall because they just look so cool. They really do. What is it? I myself have did black and white in college, and that was a lot of fun for me. What is it about color and this form of photography? Because this is something new for a lot of folks that has intrigued you to then, of course, take a lot of this work and put it into a book for people to hopefully more than just have it on the coffee table.
Well, it goes back to being a child and around cameras when I was 4 years old, and my folks were making short films that went into the movie theaters. And I watched when people brought a camera out and the crowds would gather, and then they took me with them because they don't think they could afford babysitters. when they were showing the films to the distributors, and the magic of seeing things that came through a camera on a big screen. Just I liken myself to Mickey Mouse in Fantasia watching The Wizard, and I just knew I wanted to play with this magic wand, cameras and storytelling. And I have a love of glass on my shelf. Well, you can see behind me all kinds of antique cameras. Some of those are from the 1880s.
Oh, wow.
I love the medium, and I consider it, and I say I want to cast spells, and to me it's like, can I make music for the eyes with a camera? And I, as I was growing up, I lost my mother when I was 8. My life went very dark. My father married a very difficult woman who was taking prescription drugs that were like speed and drinking, and our home life was extraordinarily difficult during my teen years. And my camera was where I escaped, and my friends gave me support, and I never felt, and I did do things that were quite extraordinary. I managed to photograph the Rolling Stones when I was 17. I managed to sell an article on photography, which was me reflected in all kinds of surfaces, because I always wanted more from the image than just the ordinary replication of something, which is not wrong. I mean, I think Ansel Adams and his work is fantastic, but I was told I had to copy that. I had to learn the zone system, and that limited my thinking. And part of my growth has always been to escape the boundaries of what people lovingly were trying to put me into. My school system was trying to punish me into learning math, which I was incapable of doing. And luckily I had one teacher that gave me, put me in the school play, let me write things for the school magazine, gave me a photography prize. And that man, during the time when my stepmother and my father were criticizing me, telling me I was egotistical, and building up in me a giant sense of defensiveness for other creative people, that man's belief in me was one of the things that kept me going as a potential artist. And that desire to explore, to make something more from what an image could be, has never left me. As I got more and more into the movie world, I had my heroes in photography, and they were wild. There were Philippe Halsman, the jump photographer, or Ouija, who did all these wild and fascinating images. Or it was a sense of, frankly, I loved Georgia O'Keeffe, who wasn't really a photographer, was married to one, or had a boyfriend who was one, and that discovery of the beauty that she created. And there was a photographer in Canada called Freeman Patterson, whose work is gorgeous. He's an ex-seminarian, and he photographed nature in ways that were poetic and made you choke up when you looked at it. And I'm looking at my images and mine, trying to get it right, trying to make the image that the orthodoxy had told me, the reproduction of the perfect on the thirds. And I got to feel that my work was banal. I'm in my 30s and 40s, and I'm making movies. I'm very, very lucky, and I hate to tell people to look at my career as success. I want people to look at my career as a series of mistakes and successes, because I don't think it's helpful to other people, and to look at me and say, well, look at what he did. I want to tell people there's as many scripts I didn't get made that are just as wonderful as the ones I did get made, and my failures are still burdens to me. So I gave up. I felt my work in photography was banal. I was just concentrating on filmmaking, and my daughter, who was I think 14 at that time, started using my Nikons, and I looked at her work, and she didn't have any rule book. And so she was making images that were in black and white, that had weird compositions, nature photography where there was weird focus points, and there was this poeticness and this explorativeness to her work, which made me start to question what I had been taught and what I had bound myself to. And my wife knew that I bought digital camera for my son, and she knew that if I bought him one, it would be a good one. So she bought me a digital camera and tried to re-inspire me to take up my photography. And I love nature. I love waves. I grew up in a place called the New Forest when I was a teenager, which literally is wild lands with wild ponies growing on it, and cattle and deer, and surrounded by the Solent, which is the channel that goes out to the English Channel. And so I grew up with all this freedom to walk and to experience nature and photograph it. But for the first time watching my daughter work, I realized that I wasn't actually experiencing anything. And with this new camera, which the entire back of the camera is a Lumix LX1, was a viewfinder. And so we were in Hawaii for Christmas, and I waded out into the waves, and I held the camera up as the waves were hitting me. And I've always said, never buy a camera you wouldn't climb a tree with, because you don't want to have so much equipment you're scared to do things.
Yeah.
And as the waves went out at sunset, I put the camera inches above the water, and instead of having it to my eye, I was looking at it. And as the waves went out with the sunset bouncing off the curlicues and things, these were extraordinary, dynamic, dancing visual patterns. And I had no idea how to judge them. I just knew that there was something in there that was magical. But and they were so out of the box from anything I'd seen other people do. I was unsure if this was like BS. This is like, no, this can't be real. This doesn't make any sense. I learned to share them with a few artist friends. Uncertainly, what do you think of this? This is this okay? Is this kind of cool? I'd also read an article in a very, I thought a very progressive website about photography. It said, "Why are you holding the camera still?" Well, I'm supposed to. It's called shoot, and I'm supposed to, like a rifle. You're supposed to release the shutter button while holding your breath, so that you get this perfect sharp image. And the idea of actually moving the camera or taking long exposures so things aren't sharp but they're musical to the eye was weird. It was painful in ways, fighting the orthodoxy that I had accepted. But I started that journey, and I've been on it for 17 years now. And each time I take photos, I try and train myself to say, what if, not what am I supposed to do? And I'll be beside a stream, and I'll literally wait until my subconscious says, why not shoot with 5-second exposures and see what happens, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But I then do it, and as I work with the final, the thing called RAW, which is the image that's trapped in the camera before the actual algorithm that puts out a JPEG, which is the finished image. I work with the RAW, and I've learned to look at every RAW that I take, because I am discovering things that I've never seen before. And instead of responding to them with this is not familiar and it's not right, I'm trying to train myself to say, this could be, what is this? With small moves, by sharpening it a little more, by adding some contrast, adding a little saturation, can I make this tell me something? And can I make it so that the person viewing this sees nature in a new way, sees the nature in a way that revives a sense of freshness and personal experience? One of the things we live with a brain, and I think I'm a giant fan of studying evolution and evolutionary psychology, and our brains are astonishing, but we live with familiarity, which blanks out half of what we live with. When we drive home in a familiar route, we don't see it. When we walk into our backyard, we may have a tree there, but we don't see it, because it's there all the time, and our brains trained to pay attention mostly to change. So when I'm taking a photograph that is emotional for me, I may sometimes shake the camera while I'm photographing a tree, and suddenly that tree will look like it's dancing, and it'll look like it's attached to the atoms of the world. Or and what that does, and I know it seems kind of wacky, but when I'm tweaking an image, I don't have Photoshop, by the way. I don't know how to use Photoshop. I'm very
No.
analog. I came through the same thing you did, using black and white, and doing with the larges, and rubbing the print in the developer to get it to warm up a little bit, and
Yeah.
you know um, and then this process of not knowing what you're going to discover and then discovering it, that opened doorways, and my judgment has been to continuously explore and accept, and that vision of a tree becomes something that I've never seen anybody else create, and I'm full of uncertainty of what its true value is. I'm learning from other people what they see and what they feel when I do this. But I've got to say, it's the most exciting thing I've done. I am constantly in a state of joy at the explorations, and when a piece feels right, I literally choke up. When I'm looking at an image and it is, I stop sharpening it or adding any color balance, and it emotes something, and I feel so grateful. It's a very amazing experience.
Well, I'll tell you, you are experiencing something that one of my regular guests here on Tell Me Your Story talks about. He is a Dennis Henson, and he has written a book called, if I can remember, Real Impact, Daily Inspiration. That's the book. He has
Yeah,
33 stories in there. Now, the only way that these stories of significant and incredible people who have overcome all kinds of odds make it into the book is if, not every single time, but very close, if he reads the story and he gets a tear coming down his face.
right.
If it
Yes.
touches him like that, it goes in the
Yeah.
book. And he has two more volumes coming out. So you're experiencing that same kind of thing when you look at those images that you've taken. And what I think I really love, my wife and I, we were at Oak Creek Canyon in Arizona, in Sedona, Arizona area. And I had my little, I was using at that time a mini disc recorder and a microphone. And it was what's called I want to say a 735. They referred to it as a hammer years and years ago because it was so tough a microphone, you could actually use it as a hammer and not hurt it, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what, I'm going to get it. I took it with us to, I don't know exactly why, but I did. And she's sitting on a rock facing the Oak Creek. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to take my shoes off. I'm going to get this recorder. I have the fanny pack, keep it out of the water and so forth. I'm going to take a walk in the brook here, in the creek. And I'm walking along, and all of a sudden I slipped just a little bit, didn't fall down, but I dropped the microphone in the water. And I'm thinking, oh well, there goes that one. I mean, no big deal. It's old, and I've had it for a long time. No, no, no harm, no foul. But I was wearing headphones, and I could still hear the water from underneath the surface.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So it's the same kind of thing that your daughter was doing, not so much breaking the rules. I don't think I'm guessing she didn't know what the rules were. So she took this tool, shall we say, or this device and just let her imagination run away with her. And that is such a beautiful thing. And it's even more beautiful for you and I. I'm 65. And if I can have an experience where if it's, well, disassembling the top half of a hutch that we don't want anymore, and we're just going to get rid of it rather than try to sell it or give it away. I'm going to take it apart. We'll take it where it needs to go. Or doing any number of other DIY kinds of things around the house, or being creative in the studio. Uh, it's hard sometimes, isn't it? I'm guessing that for you, well, let me ask you, was it a struggle for you when you saw your daughter doing what she was doing, for you to then try to emulate her and say, okay, I'm going to either try to break the rules or I'm going to try to forget about the rules and just play?
Well,
Is that
that
kind
play
of,
is very much it's the triggering of it, but the decision to be able to actually accomplish it took a long time. It wasn't an on-off process. It was a series of wearing down the institutionalization that I'd experienced in making reproductive photography such a sainted process for me, and learning step by step to take the image and force myself to make images that were antithetical to the rules, and then discover going through the discovery process. As I said, it's a 17-year process, and I'm still learning. There's an analogy which I like, and that is we have a collection of native art and Inuit Eskimos carvings, and I was able to go to the Arctic several times and fell in love with their work. And they say that they release the animal from the stone. They don't impose on the stone what they believe they want to see. They discover what it wants to give them. And I sort of feel like that's been the process with my photography. And there's an analogy in that, Richard, that in when I finally had the courage to write, it wasn't something easy. Never felt like I'm a master artist in any way. It took me a long time. I discovered that the film scripts I wrote, which had come through my emotional need to express myself, which sometimes was inarticulate, but just felt that there was a purpose, and then searched to fill that purpose by trying to be omnivorous in my thinking until it started to gel, which those scripts were often not commercial in their intention, but they were personal in their sense of discovery and what they meant to me. And the evolution of them was going into trance states almost, and letting this come through you. They sold more frequently than the ones that I wrote for the studios. I wrote Gulliver's Travels for Disney with Arnold Schwarzenegger attached, and spent a lot of time. And the studio had said to me, "It's a lovely script. I don't know why I'm not going to make it." And you go, there's a year. But when I had the privilege of having a son with my wife, and looked at what the extraordinary effort it was to raise a child, to grow a human being, and at that time, we were at the point where Schwarzenegger and Stallone were making movies like Commando, where shooting down a lot of people was considered heroic. And I just had this conviction I wanted to make the alternative. And I call those movies about the takers of life, and I wanted to make a movie about the maker of life. And slowly this concept came to me of putting an Arab and a Christian side by side in a movie where they joined forces to take on an evil. And I wanted to make a movie where a rich, spoiled kid of a baron's son learns to be willing to die for his peasants' children's futures. And that was the two things that moved me, because I saw this film, if I ever got it made, speaking to the world my son would grow up in. And the idea that supporting altruism, supporting a underdogs, and that seemed like purposeful. And I started pitching it to the studios, and three studios, Disney, TriStar, and Geffen, all said the same thing. No one wants to see people with swords. They want to see people with guns. You're wasting your time. And there wasn't a clarity in my own company that this was a good idea. And our assistant said to me, "I think it's really great. And if you want to start writing, I'll do my best to support you." So I started writing the script for Robin Hood, which was eventually became one of the biggest hits that year, with the intention not to give up on myself, not to fold because other people didn't believe, but to see what would come out of me. And I started this writing process where if you, oh, and this is similar to what I do with when I'm trying to make a photograph, is I let the instincts come through me. And one of the keys is not to aim for perfection. If you aim for perfection, you put blocks in your way. You start to criticize your work as you're creating it. And I say the first draft has to be the Lewis and Clark. It's any freaking way to the coast is the right way, because you've never been there before. And you should look at it as an adventure of discovery, and the mistakes you make, the stream that you went up that ended up petering out, that's fine, because any way till you get to the coast is a journey that you can't criticize yourself for, because you can't blame yourself for not knowing where you're going. But if you have that courage to explore out of some personal joy, and I yearn to speak through film. I want to make stories that live and tell people good things, uplifting things. So writing Robin Hood, as I was writing it, I was sure it was pretty shitty. I'm giving pages to my partner John as we're going along, and I'm saying, this is really corny stuff, isn't it? I mean, Robin comes back from the wars and he sees Maid Marian walks out on a balcony, and she's a very large, chubby lady, and he says, "Oh, I see the years have been kind to you." And then this person, the Hood, jumps out and tries to drive them out of the house, and that is actually Maid Marian defending their home. And I think that's really cool. And he says, "No, it's really cool. Keep going." And what I realized is we can't judge and create at the same time. They're two different brain sets, and we must let one brain set go. And that's the same thing with my photography. I will decide I'm going to put an N9 filter, which is a filter that makes the amount of light coming into the camera really small, so I can shoot with a very wide aperture, which then puts things out of focus. And I can also use a very high ISO, which means that everything will be very granular. And then I'll shoot trees against the sunlight, and I will maybe move the camera while I'm shooting them, or I'll shoot a stream and let the stream hold the camera still, but let the stream move, or waves. And there's no rule to what I do. It's just, can I find some instinctual idea from my collective unconscious of photography that suggests a new way to try and create an experience with the camera. So that's a long-winded way around a question. I'm sorry if that. I hope that's not.
No, it's absolutely fine. I want to let our listeners know that we are talking with Pen, and it is pronounced Densham, correct?
Yep.
And we're talking about his latest work, and I'm gonna make sure I get the pronunciation of that correctly. It's a photographic book of his. Well, it's a book of his photographs, and it's pronounced qualia.
Qualia. I believe
Qualia.
it's pronounced qualia.
Qualia.
And it was helpful to me to try and find a language to explain what my work is trying to do. I'm trying to share the emotional experience of nature, and by giving people a sensory reaction to seeing a wave, a tree, a flower, koi. And sometimes I've also shot street scenes in India, for instance, which are full of motion and color, because the saris are just gorgeous. But the term qualia, I discovered, was a philosophical term for things that can't be described in words. And I
Perfect.
so love that.
That's
Love
perfect.
that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue this conversation about that which we can't put words to. Almost sounds a little bit like the name that cannot be mentioned,
Yeah,
Voldemort.
right.
Anyway, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story, I'm Reverend Dr. D, and he is Pen Densham, and we're talking about Qualia, the book. It is a, book of his photographs. Extraordinary. I've looked through it a number of times, and as I mentioned, there's a part of me that wants to take the preview version that I have, cut it up, take the pages out, and put them up on our wall. Maybe make a giant mural. And if I do that, I'll send you a picture of that. But then again, I don't want to destroy the book, because I want to have it available for other people to look at as well. It's just, I love the colors. Matter of fact, I joke with people that the reason why I am a Windows and an Android user as opposed to an Apple product user is because all of the people I know who are using those products, those other Apple items, the colors are all slightly washed out. I like vibrant. I grew up with Warner Brothers and
Yep. Right.
Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and with low vision, I needed the bright colors.
That makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
so sorry, folks, but there are those who say that we elect political figures not because of their policies, but usually because of what they look like. They have a beard, they don't have a beard. They have nice looking hair, they're bald. They're this, they're that. It has nothing to do with what they stand for. And it's like, okay, then I'm going to choose the products that I use based upon what they look like. And if they're appealing to me and pleasing to me, well, guess what? That's what I'm going to use. I want to talk a little bit about your background and where you come from, because you have been looking through, not literally, but at sometimes, yes, the lens, creating for what, both the big and little screens for quite a number of years. I mean, you've already mentioned a little bit of that to us. Tell us about how that got started, and obviously, as you mentioned about your parents and their forte in cinema and so forth.
Well, I think I'm very lucky in that I didn't get processed. My joy of cameras has never been knocked out of me. I left school at 15, thinking that it couldn't get any better, and I was going to be processed into something I wasn't. And then my father really pushed me to go take a job in an electric blanket factory. And luckily, the owner seemed to think that I might be going to electrocute some of his customers, so I didn't get the job. Um, my first job was in a photography store where I helped to, print photographs of brides and things, and then got a job in a photography department in a factory, and realized suddenly that my whole world was shrinking into the factory. And it was really interesting because you could see it I'm 15 working this, and I started to feel trapped. And I broke free of that, left the factory. But I also learned some things because I was in the photography department and they had some great cameras, and the guy that was working with loved it, but it was very technical and cold. And my my life didn't present too many opportunities. And at 19, I fled to Canada, thinking I was old and a failure. And I found a country where it actually gave funds to people my age to create. And I met a 15-year-old who was making 6-sound films. And I formed a home where I rented a large house and rented rooms out to filmmakers and discotheque disc jockeys and things. And found a community of creative people, and all of us were searching, and there were we were working hippies. We had a very moral sense of working on things and doing things, but we also had this desire to explore. And I was able to work with 2 or 3 companies, and one of them made educational films, which I thought were the dullest and most insulting to the children that were going to be looking at these, because it didn't treat them as rich sources of imagination, didn't treat them with respect. It was just going to hammer the rules at them. And when I started my own company, the very first thing I did was I got a grant, and with my partner John Watson, we did we recruited 9 children from schools and gave them access to our company, showed them how films got made, and asked them to write a script selling life as if it was a commercial. And 9 children made these commercials for life, and we ended up putting them together into one project, and it was nominated for an Oscar. And it was my way of saying to the education system that was trying to hem me in, don't underestimate the extraordinariness of these brains. Don't force them to this Victorian idea of processing them into utilizable beings, when you should be trying, and the word educe from Greek means to bring forth. And so that was a way of me saying, please, treat younger people so that you're trying to find what they could be and bring it out of them. We also we made many short films that were very experimental in terms of shooting streams and ice forms and horses and people who were underdogs, and that meant that we were shooting. I would shoot, my partner would edit. He won more awards for his editing than any other editor in camera. We literally had holes in our shoes. We put everything we had into making these films, and the Canadian television system would buy short movies from us that we were trying to make beauty and uplift. And then we decided we would put several short movies together and make a long movie. And that suddenly we realized that sold around the world because we had no spoken narration. We just wanted to make the visual strengths of the films very powerful. And at that time, as I say, we were lucky because people like Carol Ballard and ourselves and several others, even Spielberg made a film called Amblin. We could sell movies to the libraries and schools. Schools were showing movies to children to create imagination. And so these there was a whole world of really bright and wonderful films being created back in the early 70s. And we were participating in that. And that we discovered that if you won awards, people bought your movies, but we didn't know how you would win awards. We always thought that they came to you to look for your films, and then we realized, no, you have to enter. So we started entering our films. We learned that if you've made a film that was really cool and it ended with a catharsis, some kind of emotional explosion of some kind, those films tended to be successful and they sold well. So we then trained ourselves to make very visually potent and fun and uplifting films. And that's what I'm sort of trying to do with my photography now, because my films are being preserved by the University of Toronto, but I'm actually seeing some of these films again for the first time in 30 and 40 years, and I'm looking at them, and A, I can remember my body language when I was using the camera, but B, I can see water out of focus, forms moving. I can see that language was in me that I'm pulling out, and that's voice. And so what I'm really excited to do is also try and help other people find their voice, because I think this instinctual process of creative growth and the encouragement to take risks so that you find out who you really are is the most important thing I can do for other artists. And I wrote a book on screenplay writing, the one I would have loved to have read, that tries to help people know that their own responses, their own life experiences, their own zeitgeist, when expressed through the conscious, the unconscious, but through to the conscious, create stories that are richer and more personal and have more to teach. And I think we're the shaman of this age. I think that the filmmakers and the artists are what the tribe would have had as shaman in the old tribal world. And our job is to enrich the culture with opportunities and to help people look at their lives and find ways of learning better ways of succeeding by watching the characters struggle in our films. And I think that if you surrender to it, if you let your body do it, I think storytelling is organic and biological and bred for it, because it helped the tribes, to help the animal to survive.
Pen Densham's my guest, and Quali is the book that you'll want to get a copy of. What's the website we want to send people to, Pen, to get them their own copy, and maybe even be able to go to your website to even take a look even before they purchase?
Well, we're doing something very unusual. Is we're giving the book away as a PDF to people, and my goal was just to share my work. And so if they go to pdensham.com, then you can actually download a copy of the book. You can also look at my work at Pen Densham Photography, and you can see, and that also is on that website. You can click on that. My goal was not to turn this into a profiteering process. There's a purity to me exploring, and working for the studios, budgets, rewrites, deadlines, and I've done the money-making thing, and I wanted to keep that away from this purity of exploration, not trying to find what is right to sell. As soon as you do that, I feel like I choke up myself. And I was pushed to do this promotion by other people that believe in my work. I'm kind of shy, but they suggested I do this, and I go, okay, let's see, because I got to keep growing. I know I have to keep growing, and so other allies of mine have been pushing me to expose my work more broadly, and to learn from how other people see it and what they feel about it. And the process has been fascinating, a little scary.
Yeah, well, that kind of adventurous adventure can be a little bit scary. I know for myself, just this process that my wife and I have been through of moving after being somewhere for 19 and a half years and then being
Wow.
told,
Yes.
you got to go, and then finding a place and then packing everything. I remember I was listening to an interview that I did almost 20 years ago when I first started this series of programs called Tell Me Your Story. We were talking about moving from Phoenix. And I said, I could not believe how much stuff we brought with us. Back then, it was a moving van that came and they packed everything up into the moving van and you paid by weight.
Oh yeah.
And when we got to our destination and they gave me the invoice, um, 9,000 pounds of stuff we brought with us. 9,000 pounds. And I think it was 5 grand back then. But this time it was a self move with the U-Haul company and so forth. And a couple, 3 trucks later, we finally have everything in here. And it's just, okay, is there a right way or a wrong way to do all of this, And, you have people who have written books. I've had them on this program talking about this process. And it's the same thing with photography. And I love talking about this incredible genre, if you will, or process of securing images on paper, if you will. But what is real interesting is the digital age that has been around now for, well, I guess you could say 30 years.
Yeah.
There's a statistic that I heard about regarding the number of images, we'll put it that way, that are captured every day that are never looked at by the taker of those images, and the number, and I want to say it's almost daily, maybe it's annually, but I'm thinking daily. It's like in the billions of images,
Wow.
billions that no one's ever going to see. And what's really sad, and you're not doing this, I know that, and I know you're doing digital. What's really sad is that the picture that this person took, they probably don't even remember because they weren't really there. They were looking through the viewfinder. How do you help yourself to maintain a connection to that very nature? For example, the tree and the sunset you were talking about earlier. How do you keep yourself connected?
Well, first of all, that's a gorgeous question. There's a thing called biophilia, which is the belief that human beings need to be around nature. There's a group of people in Japan that have this thing called forest bathing, where they take people into forests and ask them to touch the trees, to reconnect with what has become so familiar we don't see it and feel it. And they believe even the chemistry of your hands going onto the bark and the exchanges things. What we're learning also is that trees communicate with each other underground, and they're actually communities of trees, and they help each other. And there's things that we're not consciously being educated about, we take for granted. So that process of opening doors to what nature is, and my own experience of trying to feel connected is part of what my cameras are doing. The gorgeous thing about digital is, unlike film, you can hold back your highlights and expose your shadows at the same time. You've got actually more sculpting to do than you can with just a black and white photo or even a color print. Digital lets you open doorways into the way that the image can be discovered. And I say I'm the algorithm. I'm saying that my emotions are the thing that measure how I feel that the material should be, not what the dictates of it are to make it familiar or obvious, but to what is the transition through the digital process of exploring it and seeing what it can become. And that's the excitement. And I as I said, I force myself to look at every image because I'm discovering shapes and forms that aren't familiar. I've never seen these things in photography, and I will consider myself to have been successful if I've actually contributed to the idea that photography can be more than it is presently. Everybody can take a great picture with an iPhone or a camera because the systems are so well created now. But what can you do to express yourself? That's the key. And can you touch nature through your experience? And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, Pen Densham is my guest, and we're talking about Qualia, the book, and we hope that you will check it out. You can go to Pen Densham. Let's see, it's pendenshamphotography.com/s/Qualia. And it goes on from there, but you'll find it, and we'll be linked. We will have a link to that place where they can get that PDF or that digital version of the book. And
Great.
I'm hoping there's a way we could maybe even turn it, if we wanted to, into a screensaver for those who still use them. I don't, but who knows? Maybe I might start again, once again, to use those as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm a Reverend Dr. D, and Penn is with us here. And I'm curious. I have obviously my phone. I have obviously a camera on my laptop. I have a couple of tablets that have cameras, but the one I am most proud of, I still have, and I believe it does still work, and I think I still have the flash attachment, is my father's 35 millimeter Argus.
Oh yes, I have one on my shelf.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I use, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I
And
can't quite see it right now, but yeah, they were gorgeous. Yes.
yeah. And that's what I use for the black and white
Yep.
photography. And it was fascinating to dive into what wasn't even referred to as analog back when I was taking the course in the 90s. Or actually, I think it was earlier. No, it was the 80s, early 80s when I was taking that class at Phoenix College, junior college. Analog wasn't considered analog. I mean, that's just what it was. But when digital came along, they gave everything else that wasn't digital that term of analog. I'm wondering, my wife and I went to Ireland twice. The first time we went, and my father let me borrow his digital. It was a Kodak digital camera with a little card you'd stick in there for the memory and so forth. And I remember downloading it onto the computer, and I had to go through every single image, and I had to brighten every single image up. The next year that we went, I didn't use that camera. I think I did bring it with us, but we bought these disposable cameras that you would then take to maybe the Walmart or this place or the other. Or when I was a kid growing up, you'd go to the Photo Mart or Photomat,
Yes.
little things out in the parking lot. And when I got the images back, and I can't remember if it was downloaded or a disc, I didn't have to touch up a single one of those. Now, I'm wondering, is that because in the processing of those digital images by the company that I gave the cameras to, they automatically did that? There was an algorithm that automatically, put some extra contrast in there to make them look a little nicer, a little sharper. Is that probably what happened, or could it have been
I'm
the
sure
camera
it
that I
was.
was
Yes.
using?
Well, I'm sure it's a combination of the algorithm would have been the outcome that the manufacturer of the Photoshop would have wanted to see that would be the most pleasing to the most people,
Mm.
and which means you'd see fairly good you'd have filled in the shadows, you'd be sharp enough so that you feel like you're gripped onto the people that you're looking at. The eyes are obviously the most important thing because, as they say, they're the doorway to the soul. We're
Yeah.
taught as photographers to photograph on eyes. And when I'm shooting something as abstract as waves moving, I'm still looking for pieces that waves to me are like living sculptures and of light and color and shape and form, but they still need to have threads in them of sharpness in certain places. And I feel like the eye then embraces the entire image because they have some tendrils of sharpness. They engage you so that they give you some kind of structure to build it, and the areas that are out of focus or moving become like passion, or they become, as I say, like music. And I'm jokingly, I'm the Jimi Hendrix of cameras. It's like, and if you put me somewhere, I'm halfway between Pollock and Monet. It's like, and I have a giant respect for artists. When I look at Monet's work, I'm humbled. But his work is the same process of making you appreciate light and color and form. Painting haystacks all through a day just to see the different shapes and forms and colors and the purples and the joy. And it just, when I stand next to a Monet, I'm just in awe of the magnificence of the work that man does. And I do feel that I'm not all that important. I mean, it's like you look at that work and you see what he discovered, and you see the other people, Turner and people like that. They're extraordinary. I'm lucky that I mastered a machine that lets me vocalize in a way my passion for telling people a story with a still photo. And I do think my images are full of energy because I come from filmmaking. I'm not willing to let a picture just sit. I want a picture to embrace you. But I have to acknowledge that there are other creators that were far more, Van Gogh. I mean, good grief. What a brain, and yet what lack of reward that he experienced during his own life. It's just, the magnificence again of breaking the conventions and finding another way to express art and feelings and nature. Just, I'm humbled.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more with the folks in my genre as well who have come before me, who have paved the way for some of the things that I have done, and it's really kind of exciting. I think about an experience back in Phoenix, back in probably the late '80s or early '90s, and I was playing around with a couple of pieces of recording equipment, and I started to play around, and I got this particular sound. I thought, oh, I like that. I'm going to hang on to that. I'm going to remember how I made that, right? Well, in 1995, 96, when I was playing around with this first piece of digital audio editing software called Cool Edit, and I came across this effect, they called it, and it was referred to as flange. And I treated the audio file with it. I'm going, wait a minute. That sounds an awful lot like, going back to the late '80s, early '90s, what I'm not going to say I created it, I discovered it. Okay. I discovered it. And there it was, an algorithm that would process the audio in that same genre. And it was like, wow. The same thing happened with an accident when an engineer was installing a turntable back then in the early mid '80s. He was installing a turntable, and we put the turntable in Q so it didn't go out over the air, but we could hear it. And it's like, well, wait a minute, where's the vocal? And of course, you listen real hard. Why is it all the way in the back? Why is it way back there? He said, oh, I know. Hold on. Hang on a second. What he had done is he'd plugged in the left and right channels. He'd wired it up to where one of the channels was what they
Wait,
call
inverted.
out of phase. And
Yeah.
Then, when I started doing digital editing and I was working with a true stereo file, I thought, I wonder if. And so I took one of the channels and I took it out of phase and I mixed it together, and voila, I have just created my own karaoke sing
Yes.
along
Right.
file.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just amazing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm rather miffed. And I know that when dealing in photography, you don't have this issue per se. But in music specifically, we have these individuals who, rightly or wrongly, and I'm not taking sides, they sue someone because they use 12 notes out of their song in the other artist's piece of music. Well, biblically, there's an Old Testament statement that says that there is nothing new under the sun. Now, I started thinking about that passage about 15, 20 minutes ago when we were talking, and I'm thinking, yeah, but in this case, I have to wonder if in photography, like what you are doing specifically, there's never been anything like it as far as I know. Is there anybody else doing what you're doing?
Not that I've discovered. I've certainly seen some people use one or two of the techniques, moving the camera occasionally or something like that. But I've not seen somebody go to the extent of where I'm going. And again, I'm kind of surprised at where I am. It's not like I knew where I was going to get to.
Hmm.
My my um, my encourages in screenplay writing, and I liken the people that I work with who are spiritually uplifting, who work with you and are helping you go through the pain of giving birth, story midwives. And I have art midwives. I have people who I trust, who are pushing me to keep taking the risks, but holding my hand, telling me this is okay, keep going, don't stop. And it's thanks to those that I have been on this journey, because I can't judge what I'm doing. I can't tell you that I know how you're experiencing my work, but I do know that the pleasure of this discovery, this constant search, and the colors, the music of it, the vibration sometimes turn me on. But but there's no. I don't have a guide path. I don't know that I'm not on rails. I don't have. So I'm not seeing other people doing what I'm doing, and I'm doing it in many different ways with many different techniques. But the base technique is still literally listening to my unconscious till it tells me. And I wrote a poem about it, and essentially, um, the the reward is that I get given these images. I don't make them.
Hmm.
They're not like I go out and say I'm going to trap a stream and it's going to make you feel extraordinary. I will go out with the hope that I will discover something, but I don't know what it might be until
Yeah.
I actually see it and address it. And there's also hundreds of shots that don't work with photography. It's a game of numbers. It's like monkeys and typewriters will write Shakespeare if you have enough. So,
I
but
love that analogy. I really do.
but it's that's that magic thing of just you're looking at it and you go, no, no. I built a koi pond with my wife at our last house. We planted bougainvillea and tabulia trees, and so that they would be above the pond and they would reflect the blossoms and wisteria. And I cast my koi by buying koi that had very specific patterns and shapes and diamond scale. And then when I sold our house, because I would go out and just sit by the koi pond for hours, and there was a small fountain that was running water into the koi pond, and it would break up the surface. And when the sun hit it, you could shoot through this breakup and get the koi underneath and all the colors. When I sold the house, I put a clause into my contract that I had visitation rights to my koi pond, because I wanted to be able to go back at certain times of the year, knowing that the reflections and the colors would be perfect. And I went back, and I finally and it was rented, and so it was hard to get back in. And the lady was, oh, you really have to do it. Yeah, I'd like to. and I realized they put an algicide in the water. The water was
No.
green. And then you go, no, Pen, stop making choices. Let it be what it is. So I photographed the koi with this green, and the koi at the top were all the normal colors, and as they went deeper, they went greener. And I'm shooting very, abstract and and I get the most beautiful reactions because I stopped censoring what I wanted to see and said, what am I being given?
Hmm. Yeah, it is fascinating. I've been using that same, I'll call it method, if you will, as we began the process of packing, and getting rid of this. Are we going to keep this? Are we going to give this away? Are we going to throw this away? Are we taking this with us? It was like three or four different choices. And when we finally got everything here, we started thinking about, well, did we remember to take off the wall outside the front door, this, that, and the other thing? And I thought, yeah, we left it there. That's gone, And so we have the memories, okay? That's the best we can do is we have the memories, and no one can take that away from us, no matter where we move, kind of thing. Um, I love taking pictures, but I don't take that many. But here's what's interesting: which do you enjoy more, if there is even if there's even a way to categorize this, or what have you? Um, Taking these stills, or creating or creating the moving pictures, which technically speaking are still made up of
Yes.
stills.
Well, they both have passionate purposes for me. Making a movie is like herding elephants. You've got to put whole studios together. You've got to put millions of dollars together. You have to get all the different departments. You have to get a yes out of a financing source. That's incredibly hard work. But I studied Hans Selye, who was an expert on stress when I was in my 20s because I had so much stress. And he talked about finding purpose in your life and using your ego and your natural drives, but put them in the service of something you believe in. And he called that altruistic egoism. And he called the positive stress of doing things that you believe in eustress as opposed to distress. And so my movies, that I made a movie, I was helpful in getting the movie Harriet made. I'm so proud of that because that's a movie about an underdog that speaks to a whole community of people about a young woman who does things that are absolutely astonishing to help others. We did a movie about getting a Medal of Honor recognized called Last Full Measure. My RobinHood speaks to putting an Arab and a Christian side by side and learning from each other. My movie Mol Flanders, which I wrote, speaks to me because I believe if you're an artist, and my encouragement is find what your voice is. Don't try and be what you're not. Try and find what your strength is. That movie is a movie about a young woman and her life journey in the 1700s and the imperfections and the mistakes she makes, which she wants to share with the child she lost contact with before she tells her that she's her mother, so she doesn't trick her child into loving her. And to me, that's a message about having a daughter and the way that women get packaged, about having to be perfect and look just for their looks and not for their hearts. And so that those things, that has an altruistic, for me, purpose.
Hmm.
And so those movies, I feel so lucky to have made. And I was brought to Hollywood by Norman Jewison because he saw my very first drama, which was a 30-minute film. And I stumbled through making it. I was an amateur working with actors and things, but some instinct in me made it all hold together. And I look at Norman Jewison's work, and it's In the Heat of the Night, and it's movies like The Russians Are Coming, and movies where he's teaching people quietly while he's entertaining them. Jesus Christ Superstar and the Fiddler on the Roof, and these films are more than just entertainment. There's a subtext to them, and if my work in photography inspires people to see nature around them as not a disposable and not as something we ignore and take for granted, but something that we touch and that it's responsible for our survival. I get so excited. 4.5 billion years, man. We've been here for that long. Don't forget that. And human beings have only been around in the form that we are presently, maybe 120,000 years. We're all bleached Africans. Everybody gets this thing up about race, but my gosh, we all come out of the same central place, and the the sense that atoms and the quantum physics and quantum entanglement and all this stuff is going on that we are taking for granted, and yet the magnificence of life, it's extraordinary. So if I can touch people with a scintilla of waking them up to seeing their own experience reflected in the way that they respond to my work, if I can give people a richer sense of involvement in life, and not just feeling trapped in the boxes that the conventions put us in, but letting us breathe and see that we're richer and more extraordinary creatures than most of the systems that we have to endure recognize in us. And I think we're extraordinary. I think the other, if I may, because I'm on a rant, I read a book in the 1990s called The Moral Animal. It's by Richard Wright. And it says human beings are basically moral. And they are basically moral because evolution bred for people that could share an environment together, because it took a community to raise the young. And therefore, we when we tell stories, we're telling stories about morality, whether it's religious stories or whether it's Law and Order. Or Law and Order is somebody disrupts the fabric of society, they tear it, and people go out, worker bees, to stop that, to sew it up, and to take that person out, so that the community can be stable, so that we can have fair exchange, so that we can all share in this world, so that our young can get to the future. And that's the way I see life. I see life as that there are outliers, people that are immoral, and it's our job to try and stop them. And there are very few of them, but they will take more than they deserve. And there are other people who are very beautiful and giving and put their best foot forward for the rest of humanity. And I want to make films about those people, so that we're educating others to give and save and do good things for humanity. And the emphasis on humankind with the emphasis on kindness, which I think is the most powerful human attribute. Being kind is so important.
Well, there's one other element you can throw into that mix of our connectedness, and that is, I learned in biology in high school that every single one of us started out, whether you like it or not, you people who are not real fans of people who are living their lives differently, we all started out as female.
Yes.
And it wasn't until, I don't know if it was the DNA or if it was God or what the determining factor was, we'll go ahead and throw another X chromosome in there. No, we'll do a Y today. On top of that uniqueness factor of the mathematical equation, when you talk about one egg
Yep.
and several million sperm cells, and you made it.
Yes.
That's the uniqueness and the specialness that we all share in that regard. And I find that fascinating. We are talking with, go ahead, please.
To go along on those, I was going to say, when you go along on those kinds of forms, I am also fascinated by those things, because we're a creature that has this gift, and I don't see religions run by women.
Mm-mm.
I would love to see, I don't see, but I do see gorgeous, healthy giving. I see people, that are caring. They just don't necessarily have the same dogmas. And I do think human beings are basically good. And I do think if women around the world would be better. I think if we looked at Native Americans, where women matrilineal processes are given, so the women run things, we might have a healthier world. So.
I would agree. I was fortunate to grow up in a family with, of course, a mother and a father, and four sisters and one brother. So there was that sort
Yeah.
of matriarchal kind of dynamic. It wasn't anything that was lorded over anybody. It was just that was the dynamic. You had, how would we put this? We had 5 to 3. I don't know what the equation is. All I know is that there was a lot more estrogen flowing around that house than there was testosterone, which may explain the reason why my brother and I, as we got into our late grade school and high school years, we did not spend a lot of time around the house. No offense to the sisters and mother by any means. It's just, we were searching for our own way of doing things, our own path, and so forth. And that's what we each have to do. As we are talking here with Pen Densham, and we're going to continue with that as we let you know. This is Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we will continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Reverend Dr. D here, along with Pen Densham, and we're talking about his book, Qualia. It's coffee table book. Would you want to put it in that category? I think it's more than that. I really do, because of what you've described as this whole emotional aspect to it.
I don't, well, it's a coffee table book is the way that you try and encapsulate something to give it a definition.
Mhm.
My goal is just to create a book of imagery that people can experience themselves reflected in the images of nature, so they can see how they feel, like a Rorschach test, or like an experience where if you put one of my pictures on the wall, I would hope that every day it would refresh itself, because it gives you a sense of belonging to nature and your life involved with the greenery. That there's as we were talking about biophilia before, apparently people in hospitals, if they have windows and can see greenery outside, get better quicker than the ones that are just with walls. And we live with vestigial pasture lands. We call them lawns, and it's still that there's no value to those lawns in terms of they don't feed us, they don't give us pasture land for our animals. But we're in denial of our actual evolutionary connection to nature. And 90% of our existence, or 99% of our existence, has been around forests and savannas and grasslands, and we've lost contact with that specialness of being part of the organic truth of what our life is, and that we're all genetically related, going back to the ancient little tiny critters that we came from 3 or 4 billion years ago. So I'm just hoping that I give people a moment of opportunity to reflect on what astonishing creatures they are, and what this universe is, with billions of galaxies. I mean, whoa! I ran 2 science fiction series, the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, and every episode was like a parable talking about science or nature or supernatural, and those things we need to stay in touch with. We need our myths. We need to have spiritual stories. We need to have David and Goliaths, or what we need to be connected back through the joy of the greater experience of humanity and the greater experience of life. And then maybe we will respect the Amazon and stop people from killing it, because that's our lungs. And maybe we'll respect people stopping the destruction of the oceans and the plastics and things. But I don't believe you can do that by na. I want to inspire people to stop, because they see the beauty in it and realize it's worth protecting.
Yeah.
You don't protect something you don't believe is valuable. You don't live in a neighborhood if you don't feel like you belong. You don't look after the neighborhood. We have to see ourselves as related. We have to see ourselves as belonging. And when we belong, then we see our children belonging, and we see that it's a good thing to help preserve it. but no lectures.
Yeah,
All capture, no lecture.
absolutely. I know that in conversations that I've heard as well as that I've had with people, especially when it comes to the issue of climate change, I'm seeing more and more documentaries and more very credible individuals that I would consider credible, like a gentleman by the name of Greg Braden. He was in a documentary talking about how what we are calling climate change, which is accurate, is not a human creation. This is a natural, sequential process that this planet has gone through as
Yes.
long as it's been here. And it's not a question of and the arrogance of man to think he's had. Forget that. No, no, no. Because here's where I go. You don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about the science. I don't care about the science. The science is, believe it or not, for me, irrelevant. I ask one question and one question only to what you have just stated. Shouldn't we clean up our planet? Shouldn't we clean it up? There's no science involved.
Right.
Why do you clean your house like we did every Saturday? We'd all get chores and we'd all go throughout the house in the front and the backyard and so forth. Maybe I'd mow the lawn. Maybe I'd do the dishes, whatever it was. And we'd clean the house. Why would we do that? And was it based upon what the neighbors were doing? We did it because we like to live in a clean home, in a clean space, number one. And did we do it because the neighbors did it? No. I don't care what the neighbors do, up to a point. I mean, if there's some issues that are starting to affect the neighborhood in general, that's a whole different story. But we did it, and I still do it today because I like to live in a clean place, not because the neighbors are doing it. So what if China and India and North Korea and again, the list goes on, aren't? So what? Does that also mean that just because other countries, other leaders, other individuals, are raping and pillaging and plundering and on and on and on, that I should do that? That kind of goes against what you said earlier about how you have discovered that we as human beings in general are moral. We have an sort of a DNA or inbred morality. We have values, regardless of where we were born and when we were born, you know.
And
So,
the dilemma is those values can be used against their best instincts because
yeah,
if I tell you that those people are evil and it's moral of you to go attack them, then we've perverted that morality. But going back to your other statement, what really moves me, and I've worked very hard to try and create a film that I've never been able to get made, but it involved Navajo beliefs.
mm,
I'm in awe of, and you probably are familiar with,
mhm,
the sense that the responsibility for each individual Native American is that they're guardians of the future and responsible for the environment for the next 7 generations into the future
mhm,
because they've evolved a culture that realized that you can't exist in a world that doesn't actually refill itself. You can't feed your young, you can't have your children, you can't have your marriages and your culture if you don't preserve the world that they will grow up in and that their children will grow up in. And I think that's a magnificent perspective. And one of my sadnesses is that we had these giant cultures on North American continent that are preservationist. The most indigenous cultures are preservationist. And we've just allowed wealthy and hoarding is apparently a natural thing. People collect nuts. It's it's like so but unfortunately we've got people that are collecting so many nuts and hoarding so many things that giving back to the environment, preserving it, it's profit without purpose. And I'm not a politician, but I do believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think that's what America was founded on, not in the pursuit of greed. And so I'd love to see people give more back to the community to make the country healthier, to
yeah,
make the opportunities for people, especially with the possibility that AI will disenfranchise a lot of people from employment. That doesn't mean they're lazy. That doesn't mean that they're deserving of not being supported. I think that that wealth should be part of the contribution, if you are really great, of making success, then part of that should go back to the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of all the people that live in the country, because they're all contributing.
Yeah.
And they're all, every guy that works or every woman that works is building that world that you live in if you have all that wealth. And they're not lazy. They're doing wonderful things to hold their families together, and it would be great to share more.
Yeah. Well, I just add one more thing before we wrap here, and that is that, and again, I'm not passing judgment. If you are a wealthy individual, no matter who's listening, and you've got millions or billions or trillions, okay, there is a word that has already been used by Penn to describe that. Now, again, I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying the observation is that that is a form of hoarding too. Okay. You can hoard stuff. You can also hoard your emotions and then cause yourself physical, mental, and emotional stress. There's also financial hoarding. I mean, you can't take it with you. I know my father passed away a couple of years ago. He took nothing with him, nothing. So,
Right.
so,
Yeah. No one gets out of here alive, right?
well, my father always
Hans
said,
Selye,
yeah, eat, drink, and be merry in moderation because nobody gets out of here alive. We are going to continue here on with Reverend Dr. D and Penn on Tell Me Your Story. Penn, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program. This has been fascinating, and I have three final questions that I want to ask you. But again, thank you so much for contributing to what we're doing here, and I look forward to people getting a hold of a copy of your book, digitally or otherwise. It's a beautiful, beautiful book and beautiful pictures.
thank you.
Let me first of all thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and we're here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. With podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're also on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. I hope you will. Click subscribe and notification. We also hope that you'll pick up a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. It's available at Amazon. And we hope that you will leave us a tip in our tip jar, which is called PayPal. If you go to richarddugan.com, there are links at the top of the page to both Amazon for the book and PayPal for the tip. And we thank you for those who have helped and to those who will. And we also say finally that we hope that you will take time during this decade of perfect vision to spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listening to that still small voice. With all that being said, now we ask the questions of our very special guest. Who is Pen Densham?
You want that I'm somebody who lost their mother when I was 8, and I've tried to make her bringing me into the world purposeful.
What gets you up in the morning?
I'm excited to see what I can discover. I never thought I would be where I am. I never sat looking at my life and saying I would end up in Hollywood making movies, making TV shows. I never thought I would be where I am. And it's this desire, and that's what I want to nurture in other people. It was irrational, but I couldn't give up on my dreams.
And finally, and you may very well recognize where this question comes from, what was your best day?
Gosh, that's a tough question. Probably when my wife gave birth to my son, because I was very scared to have children. There was an emergency cesarean. It was a very profound moment to see life coming out of my wife and realizing that I had the courage to face that because I'd had a terrible upbringing with my stepmother and my father. I wasn't sure what kind of parent I would be. And then I learned from that experience what a human is, how special we are, what magnificent beings we are, that raising a child, it allowed me selfishly to experience my own life again. And I wrote a birth scene into Robin Hood when I was writing it, and I cried. And and I thought, you're not allowed to write a birth scene into a movie. Come on! But it was an emergency cesarean, and it's instinctual. And Robin Hood sees the Moor, the person who is supposed to be an enemy, helping this woman have a cesarean operation in order to bring her child into the future. And that's the child that symbolizes what those people are fighting for when they're going up against the sheriff. And I just learned that instead of being scared to have children, and scared by the fear of responsibility would make me stop being creative, I learned that it actually enriched my perception and my desire to change the world and make it more appropriate for other people's children as well as my own.
Well, once again, I thank you so much for being a part of the work we're doing here on Tell Me Your Story. And I hope we can get together again and talk more, not only about the work that you're doing, but about what your life is all about. And we're excited to have you a part of Tell Me Your Story.
Thank you. This is a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life and you being in mine. To my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho. And this program is dedicated to Rob and Michelle Reiner, who were taken from us way too soon. Not in the way that any of us would have expected, but nonetheless, we raise our glasses to you and salute to what you have contributed to our society, to our civilization, to our hearts and minds. And may we carry that with us into the future. And one biblical statement says that the sins of the father are passed on to the sins of the son to the seventh generation, which means the kindnesses, as you referred to in the Navajo tradition, of the father are passed on to the sons to the seventh generation. Let us pass on kindness, and we will talk to you folks next time.